This is the story of a series of murders which shocked the city, devastated the lives of 4 families, and left an innocent man living under the shadow of suspicion for more than a decade. This is the story of Steven Grieveson. This is the story of the Sunderland Strangler. It is Friday the 18th of May 1990. 14-year-old Simon Martin leaves his home here in Amy Street, Southwick for the last time. He has never run away before. On Saturday, May 26th, 8 days after Simon left home, his body is discovered by 2 boys in the disused Gilside house in Roker. A post-mortem examination reveals he's died from brain injuries as a result of blows to the head from a blunt object. Police say they believe Simon has been dead for no more than 2 days and have ruled out any sexual motive for the act. Both conclusions are deeply flawed. 2 days later, Chief Inspector Ronnie Wright poses with Simon's distinctive baseball jacket on the front page of the Echo as the teenager's devastated father, Robert, appeals for help to trace his son's killer. In June comes news of a breakthrough as police reveal they have arrested a suspect and have been interviewing him for 2 days. He is, it will later emerge, 16-year-old Alvin White, whose fingerprint has been found close to where Simon's body was discovered, in what detectives believe to be the youngster's blood. The teenage suspect has admitted being in Gilside House just once, but later changed his story, saying he had gone to the empty property about a year earlier and had sex with his then girlfriend, in the alcove where Simon's body was discovered. A version of events she denies. On June 22nd, 1990, the as yet unnamed Alvin White appears here at Sunderland Magistrates Court, charged with the murder of Simon Martin, and pleads with his girlfriend to confirm his story. In a highly unusual move, solicitor Cecil Emerson requests that reporting restrictions be lifted in order to make a direct appeal to the girl and her family, and tells the court it is essential that the truth be told. The charges are finally dropped after the young lady corroborates Alvin White's account and shows detectives where the pair have made love. It'll be 10 years later, in November 2000, that full details emerge of the evidence against Alvin White and the events of the ensuing months, when he sues Northumberland Police for wrongful arrest and unlawful imprisonment. The 2000 court case will also hear that the second plank of the case against him, the fingerprint, has also fallen through. A chemical used to enhance the print has destroyed any forensic material which could be tested. Detectives are unable to prove the print has been made in blood at all, let alone that it is Simon's. Alvin White spent 5 months in custody. He's beaten up by a group of youths shouting murderer on his release. So desperate is he to establish innocence that he offers to stand trial when he turns 18 in a bid to clear his name. It'll be another 10 years before he finally gets a chance to do so. By then, Simon Martin's killer will have struck another 3 times. On November 26, 1993, firefighters responding to a routine call to allotments at the rear of Monk Wearmouth Hospital in Newcastle Road find a body. It is so badly burned that a post-mortem examination is required, simply to establish that it is that of a white male. 3 days later, police confirm the body is that of 18-year-old Thomas Kelly from Monk Wearmouth and say they have ruled out foul play. A spokesman tells reporters there is no evidence of other people being involved. There is nothing to suggest the cause of death is suspicious. A local man, Steven Grieveson, has been seen with Thomas on the night of his death. He's interviewed and admits to a chance encounter, but says the pair parted on good terms. February 9th, 1994, and firefighters find another body of a teenage boy in a house here in Roker Seafront. Empty lighter fluid containers are found nearby, and the cause of death is established as asphyxia and carbon monoxide poisoning. The next day, police identify the victim as 15-year-old David Hanson, who's been reported missing from his home in St Petersview, Monk Wearmouth. Detectives confirm they believe he may have been experimenting with solvent sniffing. David's parents will later refute claims he could have been glue sniffing. Among the wreaths at David's funeral is one signed by schoolmate David Grief. He does not attend the service, however. He has been murdered the night before. February 25th, 1994. Fire crews are again called to allotments in Newcastle Road, where the body of Thomas Kelly had been found just 12 weeks earlier. They find the body, which later identified as that of 15-year-old David Grief. This time, the police response is very different. A murder-style inquiry is launched immediately. Forensic experts are drafted in, and an incident room is established. On Saturday, February 26th, Chief Superintendent Barry Stewart confirms for the first time that police are linking the latest 3 deaths, but are still not convinced the teenagers have been murdered. I am not saying that the 3 deaths are homicides in the conventional sense, but are suspicious enough to cause us concern, he tells reporters. He confirms police are looking at possible links between drug and solvent abuse and experimentation with fire. 2 days later, as it emerges that all 3 victims have been pupils at Monk Wearmouth School, head Jim Farney urges pupils to come forward with any information that might help. Police say they are still ruling out foul play, but are extremely concerned about the circumstances surrounding the deaths. Steven Grieveson has also been sighted with David shortly before his death. He's interviewed again and denies meeting David or buying drugs for him. On March the 1st, David Hanson's parents, Sheila and John, voiced their fears that their son might have fallen victim to a serial killer. John Hanson says local youngsters are living in fear. Their friends think someone is taking them from the streets and doing this, he says. They are petrified. None of them are sniffing glue, and all of them will be terrified of going to the places where the bodies were found. His wife adds, "There is something far more sinister about these deaths. If I live to be 1,000, I will never believe anything else. In fact, she'll have to wait just 2 years, almost to the day, to see her son's killer put behind bars for life." On Friday, March 11th, Grieveson, a petty criminal with 4 offences including theft, robbery, taking without consent and arson, is arrested and interviewed on suspicion of manslaughter. He's interrogated again the next day. His clothes are seized after it emerges that a fingerprint has been found at the house where David Hanson was killed. Grieveson claims it is from a different burglary, but aware he's now under suspicion for 3 deaths, changes his story and admits buying cannabis for David Grief. On remand in Durham prison on an unrelated matter, Grieveson admits to a cellmate that he had sex with a boy he subsequently killed, a reference believed to be to David Grief. As the families of 3 boys continue to express their suspicions, Dr. Nigel Cooper, who had performed the 1st and 3rd exams, grows increasingly concerned and shares his fears with a colleague who performed the 2nd examination. In August 1994, Dr. Ian West from Guy's Hospital and Professor Peter Vnisis from Glasgow University examine photos and evidence. They conclude all 3 boys have died of ligature strangulation, and in all likelihood at the hands of the same person. The following month, Detective Inspector Dave Wilson takes over the case. He has a reputation as a tenacious copper and works 13-hour days in a bid to find the killer. Police now believe they have been wrong to rule out a sexual motive for the offences. DNA tests are carried out on samples obtained from David Grief's body. On Friday, November 4th, Grieveson is arrested again and confronted with the DNA evidence. He's charged with the murders of Thomas Kelly, David Hanson, David Grief on Sunday, November 6th, and appears before city magistrates the following day. In February 1996, Steven Grieveson is convicted on all 3 counts of murder after a lengthy trial at Leeds Crown Court. He's jailed for life, with a recommendation he serve at least 35 years before being eligible for parole. John Milford QC, prosecuting, has told the court Grieveson is a bisexual who was either unable or unwilling to accept his sexuality and who had 2 motives for killing the boys. The first was to prevent them from revealing that he had demonstrated sexual preferences to them. The second was simply because he enjoyed killing them and firing their bodies. Quizzed during the trial, Grieveson admits he hid his sexuality from his friends for fear of being ostracised. His inability to come to terms with his attraction to men is clear from letters he wrote to a fellow inmate when they were both in Durham jail in 1993. The letters are deemed inadmissible by the trial judge on the basis they would prejudice the case by revolting any persons, whether they were homosexual or heterosexual. Grieveson continued to write after the killings, but letters' tone changed considerably, with no mention of sex. In December 1997, Northumbria Police apologises to the families of the 3 murdered schoolboys for initially saying they died of solvent abuse. The parents have put 62 concerns and questions about the investigation into their sons' deaths to the Police Complaints Authority, and a report by the authority has concluded police were insensitive in their dealings with the families. Solicitor Claire Routledge says the investigation report and apology has now closed the whole affair. They are relieved to have this unequivocal apology. From the beginning, all they wanted to establish was these were everyday boys who did everyday things, not criminals and not drug or solvent abusers, she says. In October 2000, Alvin White launched his case against Northumbria Police here at Newcastle Crown Court. Lawyer Matthew Caswell tells the court it is our case that this investigation was carried out in a singularly inept manner, a result of which the life of an innocent man was blighted. 2 days into the hearing comes an extraordinary revelation. New DNA techniques, unavailable a decade earlier, have conclusively cleared Mr. White. Recent analysis of the substance in which the fingerprint was found had produced a 1 in 11 million match to his former girlfriend. In November, Alvin White loses his case against the police. Judge David Wood scathing of the handling of the investigation, which he says could be described as heavy-handed, as insensitive, and even as incompetent. But critically he says, in light of the fingerprint evidence and the lack of corroboration of Mr. White's alibi, there is nothing to suggest detectives were not acting in good faith when they arrested and held him. Even as a result of the case has been handed down, news breaks that Steven Grieveson has been arrested and is being questioned on suspicion of Simon Martin's murder. In the end, he is not charged. In June 2004, Grieveson finally admits responsibility for the deaths of Thomas Kelly, David Hanson and David Grief in a letter to the Victim Liaison Service. but makes no mention of Simon Martin. It'll be another 8 years before the truth finally comes out. In January 2012, Grieveson finally admits responsibility for Simon's death. In an interview, he admits going to Gilside House with Simon that the pair performed a sex act, saying in an interview, "After I was finished, I got scared. I started shouting at him not to tell anyone. I just slipped for a minute and I started stronging him. I didn't let go, and the next thing he was on the bed. I think there was a rock or something, and I smashed his head in." Grieveson appears by video link in Newcastle Crown Court in February 2013 and admits responsibility for Simon's death, but denies murder. During the trial that October, forensic psychologist Professor Derek Perkins says Grieveson has psychopathic traits which mixed with vulnerabilities make for a dangerous combination. He tells the court his lack of emotion, callousness, lack of remorse are elements that would have contributed to his ability to kill more than once. All social service records show that Grieveson was taken into care aged 13. Reports from the time speak of him as having no insight into his behaviour or the trouble he causes and describe him as emotionless. Grieveson, now 42, is convicted of murder on October 24, 2013. A jury of 5 women and 7 men has taken just an hour to return its verdict. He refuses to come to court for sentencing. Judge Mr. Justice Ramsey tells him, "You are a sexual predator. You will murder young boys or men who do not comply with your wishes for sexual gratification." Speaking about Simon's death, he says, "Precisely what happened is known only to you. There is powerful evidence you strangled him as part of a sexual act, then gratuitously smashed his skull." Robert Martin is in court to see his son's killer finally brought to justice. In a statement he says, "Nothing in life prepares you for the loss of a teenage son, especially under the circumstances I lost Simon. My family's had over 20 years to come to terms with Simon's murder, and it has not been easy. It has been traumatic and life-changing for all the families."